My daughter's kindergarten drawings keep showing a Mr. Nobody who visits her at night. Then my security camera captured him. The first drawing appeared on our refrigerator 3 weeks after we moved into the rental house on Maple Grove. My 5-year-old daughter Iris had used every color in her crayon box to create what looked like a normal family scene. There was me with my blonde hair and Iris with her brown pigtails, standing in front of our new house with the big oak tree in the yard. But in the upstairs window, barely visible unless you looked closely, she'd drawn another figure, a tall, thin shape, colored entirely in black, except for white circles where eyes should be. When I asked Iris about it during dinner, she didn't even look up from her chicken nuggets. "That's Mr. Nobody," she said simply. Like I should already know who that was. He watches me sleep sometimes. My stomach did a small flip, but I forced myself to stay calm. Kids have imaginary friends all the time, right? My older sister had one for 3 years when we were growing up, a supposedly invisible cat named Professor Whiskers that she insisted we set a place for at dinner. This was probably the same thing, just Iris adjusting to the new house and new school after the divorce. I asked her what Mr. Nobody looked like, trying to keep my voice light and curious, rather than concerned. Iris finally glanced up at me with those big hazel eyes that looked so much like her father's. "He's really tall and really thin," she explained, holding her hands far apart to demonstrate the height, "and he doesn't have a face like us, just those white circles for eyes. He stands in my doorway at night when I'm trying to sleep, but if I close my eyes and count to 20, he usually goes away. The phrase stuck in my mind long after Iris had finished dinner and gone to play with her dolls. I told myself I was overreacting, that this was clearly just her imagination creating a coping mechanism for all the changes in her life. The divorce from Thomas had been messy and painful, and we'd had to move out of our family home into this rental because I couldn't afford the mortgage on my administrative assistant salary. Iris had been forced to change schools, leave her friends, adjust to only seeing her dad every other weekend. Of course, she'd invent an imaginary friend or visitor or whatever Mr. Nobody was supposed to be. But that night, after I tucked Iris into bed and read her 3 stories like I always did, I found myself standing in her doorway for a long time, just standing there in the dark hallway, looking into her room at her small form under the princess comforter, wondering if I was standing exactly where she imagined Mr. Nobody stood. The thought made my skin crawl, and I had to force myself to go back downstairs and finish cleaning the kitchen. The second drawing showed up 4 days later, this time on the kitchen table when I came downstairs to make coffee. This one was more detailed and significantly more disturbing. Iris had drawn her bedroom with careful attention to details I didn't even know she'd noticed. The exact pattern of her curtains, the way her stuffed animals were arranged on the shelf, even the crack in the ceiling near her closet that the landlord still hadn't fixed. And there, standing next to her bed while a small figure that was clearly meant to be Iris slept peacefully, was Mr. Nobody. In this drawing, he was even taller than before, so tall that his head nearly touched the ceiling, and his arms seemed too long for his body, reaching down toward the sleeping figure with fingers that looked more like claws. I stared at that drawing for almost 10 minutes, my coffee going cold in my mug, trying to understand why a 5-year-old would create something so unsettling. When Iris came downstairs for breakfast, still in her unicorn pajamas and rubbing sleep from her eyes, I pointed to the drawing and asked her to tell me about it. She looked at the paper and smiled, actually smiled, like she was proud of her artistic work. "That's from last night," she said cheerfully while I poured her orange juice. Mr. Nobody came again, but he stayed longer this time. He was trying to tell me something, I think, but I can't hear him properly. It's like he's talking from really far away, even though he's right next to my bed. My hands started shaking slightly as I set the juice carton back in the fridge. I asked what Mr. Nobody was trying to tell her, and she shrugged in that way kids do when they're already losing interest in a conversation. I don't know exactly. Something about not being alone, or maybe about someone else being here. Her attention had already shifted to the cartoon playing on the iPad next to her cereal bowl, and she didn't seem to notice how pale I'd gone. I spent that entire day at work unable to concentrate, getting snapped at twice by my supervisor for zoning out during meetings. All I could think about was that drawing, and Iris's casual description of this Mr. Nobody figure standing next to her bed, trying to communicate something. When I picked her up from the after-school program that evening, I made a decision. We were going to talk to someone professional about this, maybe a child psychologist or therapist who could help Iris process whatever anxiety or fear was manifesting as this imaginary visitor. But that night, something happened that changed everything. I put Iris to bed at her normal 8 o'clock bedtime, going through our usual routine of bath, stories, and goodnight kisses. Around 10:30, I was watching television in the living room when I heard a sound from upstairs that made my blood run cold. It was Iris's voice, but she wasn't crying or calling for me. She was talking to someone, having a full conversation in that animated way kids do when they're engaged with someone. I muted the television and listened harder, my heart starting to pound. That's when things got a lot worse. Full story is linked below or on my channel.